Real Reddit stories. If you love wild things and crazy drama, hit that subscribe button and drop a like to help more people find the madness.
My mom lied about my dad abandoning us, so I exposed her abuse and left. A year later, she's at my door, saying she's changed. Growing up, I always believed that women came after men, because after all, that's what my mom always told me. Except I never acted on it as much as she did. She would always yell at my older sister for not doing more. One time when she was 9, she set up a yard sale where she sold all of her old belongings and made almost $100. This was back before my misogyny brainwashing, and I honestly thought it was really cool. But when she announced it to the family at dinner, Mom just asked why she didn't give some of the money to me. I was 8 at the time. I immediately watched tears welling up in her eyes, so I spoke. "Mom, that's not fair. She earned her money. Shut the F up," she interrupted. Then my sister reached her hand into her pocket and handed me $20. This time, I was completely silent in fear of saying the wrong thing again. But instead of praising her, my mom gave her a look. "Stop being selfish, Emma," she said, before forcing her to give me $80. That night, I heard her crying into her pillow alone in her room. So the next day, I used the money to buy her a bunch of her favorite popping candy, Hershey's, and a Lego Friends Lego set. And when I surprised her with it, her entire face lit up. She hugged me so tight, I thought my lungs were going to pop out of my body. "Thank you," she yelled. But as soon as we smiled, we stopped, because that's when we heard a stomping up the stairs. We knew it was Mom, and I immediately froze up to stare at her wide-eyed. The door burst open. "What the actual F?" her voice echoed off the walls. "I told you to not be selfish, and you forced Elliot to buy all this." It didn't look like my sister was going to defend herself, so I did it for her. "Mom, she didn't tell me to buy this. I wanted to make her happy." My voice was meek, barely a whisper. Then our mom turned away from Emma to face me, her face completely changing into joy. "You are just the sweetest little boy," she exclaimed, while picking me up and twirling me around. "But you don't need to buy this selfish bitch anything ever again, and if I ever catch you doing so, you will regret it." I just nodded. When she left, Emma broke into tears, and I wanted to comfort her, to wrap my arms around her and hold her hand, but I didn't, because even though I was confused as to what was going on, I knew one thing: I was scared of my mom, and I did not want to upset her. From there, I started seeing Emma as much of a burden as our mom did. Whenever there were dishes to be cleaned, I would scream her name at the top of her lungs, regardless of who actually left the dirty dishes there. And whenever my room was dirty, I'd tell her she had to clean it. Looking back, I wasn't even angry at Emma. Beneath it all, I loved her. I was just acting how I knew my mom would want me to. From there, I could hear her crying herself to sleep every night. She started eating noticeably less than before, and her once contagious smile was replaced by a permanent look of sadness. But unfortunately, I never did anything with these observations, because I truly believed that if Emma could just somehow find a way to make our mom happy like I did, then our mom would stop being mean to her. Therefore, it was all Emma's fault. I didn't even know about the concept of a scapegoat or sexism, and sometimes I'd even try to tell her this. But it wasn't until I was in 7th grade and won a Silver Science Fair award that she actually listened. Because in response, Mom took me to Six Flags and let me eat at the local diner every day for dinner. I was allowed to eat as many pancakes as I wanted, with unlimited maple syrup. So the year after, I watched Emma pour her heart into science books. She completely stopped hanging out with her friends, and instead would plan her science fair stand. That year, she came first place with gold. I still remember the smile on her face as she ran home. It was a joy I hadn't seen since we were children. I myself was pumping with excitement, because I truly believed this would bring our family back together again. Boy, was I wrong. "Mom, I won this gold award at the science fair." "Okay, so did your brother," my mom responded when Emma tried to tell her the good news. "But Mom, I won gold. I did everything I could to win this. The teacher even told me they were proud." "I said okay," my mom yelled again. "Boys don't like a show-off, Emma." That's when I had enough. "Mom, this is really impressive. You should be proud." "I should be what?" The vein in her forehead looked like it was about to explode. She then walked over to me with her hand fully extended, and her hand met my left cheek so hard I fell off my chair. "Don't ever let me hear you defend this bitch again," she said before returning to scrolling on her phone. I locked eyes with Emma, and that's when I felt it. Mutual anger. In that moment, we both knew our mom was evil, and we had to make her pay. After that night, something changed between Emma and me. We started talking in whispers when Mom wasn't around. At first, it was just small stuff. Emma would slip into my room after Mom went to bed. We'd sit on the floor with our backs against my bed and just talk. I was 13 then, and Emma was 14. She told me about how she'd been keeping a journal of all the messed up stuff Mom did to her. I couldn't believe how thick that notebook was. The next day at school, I couldn't focus on anything. My cheek still stung from where Mom had hit me. During lunch, I sat alone and thought about everything. I realized I'd been Mom's little puppet for years. I felt sick thinking about all the times I'd yelled at Emma or made her do my chores. I decided right then I was done being Mom's golden boy. When I got home, Mom was waiting with fresh cookies. She acted like nothing had happened the night before. She ruffled my hair and told me how proud she was of her special little man. I just grabbed a cookie and went upstairs without saying anything. I could feel her eyes burning into my back as I walked away. I found Emma in her room doing homework. She looked up when I walked in, surprised. I hadn't voluntarily entered her room in years. I sat down on her bed and just said sorry. That's all I could get out before I started crying. Emma didn't say anything. She just sat next to me and put her arm around my shoulders. We stayed like that for a while. The next few weeks were weird. I started noticing how Mom would talk about Emma to other people. She'd tell our neighbor Joyce that Emma was difficult and probably going through a phase. Then she'd brag about me like I was some kind of child genius. It made me uncomfortable now that I was paying attention. One Saturday, Mom made me pancakes for breakfast, but told Emma there wasn't enough batter left for her. I watched as Emma just silently made herself toast. After Mom left the kitchen, I pushed my plate toward Emma. She shook her head, but I insisted. We ended up splitting the pancakes. When Mom came back and saw, she got that look on her face, the one that meant trouble later. Sure enough, that night she came into my room and went on a rant about how Emma was manipulating me and how I needed to be stronger. I just nodded and waited for her to leave. As soon as she did, I texted Emma, "She's crazy." It was the first time I'd ever said that out loud or in writing. Things got worse after that. Mom started checking my phone randomly. She'd burst into my room without knocking. Once she even followed me to school and watched me from her car during lunch period. I told my friend Daniel about it, and he said his mom would never do that. That's when I started realizing just how not normal our situation was. Emma and I developed a system. We leave notes for each other in this old copy of Harry Potter that sat on our bookshelf. Mom never touched books, so it was safe. We started documenting everything she did, every insult, every time she gave me something and not Emma, every lie she told about one of us to the other. One day, I came home from school and found Emma crying in the bathroom. She had chunks of hair missing from the back of her head. When I asked what happened, she told me Mom had grabbed her by the hair and yanked her backward because she'd forgotten to take out the trash. I took a picture of it with my phone. Emma made me promise not to confront Mom about it. I agreed, but I was fuming inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how things had gotten so bad. Dad had left when I was 5, and Emma was 6. I barely remembered him. Mom always told us he abandoned us because Emma was such a difficult child. Now I wondered if that was even true. What if he left because of Mom? The next day at school, I went to see the guidance counselor, Ms. Patel. I didn't tell her everything, just that things were tense at home, and I was worried about my sister. Ms. Patel gave me some pamphlets about family stress and suggested maybe we could all come in for a family session. I knew Mom would never agree to that, but I took the pamphlets anyway. When I got home, Mom was going through my backpack. She found the pamphlets and completely lost it. She ripped them up and screamed about how I was betraying the family by talking to strangers. She grounded me for 2 weeks and took away my phone. I didn't even argue. I just went to my room and slammed the door. Later that night, Emma sneaked into my room with a granola bar and an apple since Mom had sent me to bed without dinner. We sat in silence for a while before Emma whispered, "We need to get out of here." I nodded, but I had no idea how 2 kids were supposed to escape this situation. The next morning, I woke up to find Mom being extra nice to me. She made my favorite breakfast and told me she'd decided to unground me. She even gave me back my phone. I knew this routine. She'd blow up, then act super sweet like nothing happened. It was all part of keeping me on her side against Emma. At school that day, I ran into my old friend Christopher in the hallway. We hadn't hung out much lately because Mom didn't like his family. She said they were too liberal and didn't understand proper family values, whatever that meant. Christopher's mom was a single parent who worked as a nurse, and Mom always made snide comments about how she couldn't keep a man. I had stopped hanging out with him because it was easier than dealing with Mom's disapproval. Christopher smiled when he saw me, like no time had passed at all. He invited me over to play video games after school, and I decided to go without asking Mom first. It felt good to make my own decision for once. A small act of rebellion, but it made my heart race with both excitement and fear. Christopher's house was small but warm and inviting. Photos of him and his sister covered the walls. Happy, silly photos where they were making faces or hugging. So different from our house, where Mom only displayed perfectly posed portraits of me, while Emma's school photos mysteriously never made it to the frames. Christopher's mom, Cheryl, was so different from mine. She made us snacks and asked about our day without making it feel like an interrogation. When Christopher's sister Erin came home, Cheryl treated her exactly the same way she treated Christopher. No favoritism, no weird comments, just normal parent stuff. She ruffled Erin's hair and asked about her math test, then listened intently when Erin described getting a B+ and feeling disappointed. Instead of criticism, Cheryl just said, "You worked hard, and I'm proud of you. Want to go over what tripped you up later?" I almost didn't want to go home. When I finally did get home, Mom was waiting by the door. Her arms were crossed, and her foot was tapping against the hardwood floor. She'd called the school when I didn't come straight home and found out I wasn't in detention or anything. She started yelling before I even got all the way inside, her voice rising to that pitch that made my stomach clench. "Where have you been? Do you know how worried I was? You could have been kidnapped or culled. Is this how you repay me for everything I do for you?" The questions came rapid fire, not giving me a chance to answer. I just stood there taking it until she ran out of steam. Then I went upstairs without a word, my shoulders hunched as if preparing for a blow that didn't come, at least not physically. Emma was waiting in my room. She looked worried, her eyes wide and her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. I told her about Christopher's house and how different it was there. We talked about what a normal family was supposed to be like. Neither of us really knew from experience. That's when Emma showed me something she'd been hiding, a letter from our dad that she'd intercepted from the mail years ago. Mom had always told us he never tried to contact us after he left. The envelope was creased and yellowed with age, carefully hidden in the lining of Emma's old teddy bear. Her hands trembled as she passed it to me. "I've been too scared to open it," she whispered. "I thought maybe we could read it together." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. This piece of paper could change everything we thought we knew about our family, about why we were stuck in this nightmare with Mom. With shaking fingers, I carefully opened the envelope, both terrified and desperate to discover what truth it might contain. Inside was a letter dated 3 years after Dad left. My heart pounded as I read it aloud to Emma in the quietest whisper I could manage. Dad wrote that he'd been trying to contact us for years. He said Mom had gotten a restraining order against him using false accusations. He wrote about how much he missed us and how he was still fighting to see us. At the bottom was a phone number and an address in a town about 2 hours away. Emma and I stared at each other in shock. Mom had lied to us our entire lives. Dad hadn't abandoned us. He'd been trying to reach us, and Mom had made sure we never knew. I felt sick to my stomach. All those years of believing Dad didn't want us, all those times Mom had told Emma she was the reason he left, it was all lies. We heard Mom's footsteps coming up the stairs, and I quickly stuffed the letter under my mattress. We pretended to be doing homework when she burst in without knocking. She looked at us suspiciously, her eyes narrowing as they moved from me to Emma. She told Emma to go to her own room. As Emma left, Mom reminded me that I was still in trouble for disappearing after school. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the letter and what it meant. Dad was out there somewhere wanting to see us. I wondered if his number still worked after all these years. I decided I had to try calling him, but I knew I couldn't do it from home. Mom checked my phone too often. The next day at school, I borrowed Daniel's phone during lunch. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial the number. It rang 4 times, and I was about to hang up when someone answered. A man's voice said hello, and I froze. What was I supposed to say? After an awkward silence, I just blurted out, "Is this Thomas Elliott?" When he said yes, I told him who I was. There was a long pause, and then I heard him start to cry. We only talked for a few minutes because lunch was ending. Dad confirmed everything in the letter. He told me he'd been fighting for custody for years, but Mom had manipulated the system against him. He asked about Emma, and I told him she was okay, but that things were bad at home. He said he would help us, but we needed to be careful. Mom was unpredictable and could be dangerous if she felt cornered. We agreed to talk again the next day, and I promised to tell Emma everything. When I got back to class, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind was racing with possibilities. Maybe we could live with Dad. Maybe we could escape Mom's house of horrors. For the first time in years, I felt something like hope. After school, I rushed to find Emma. We hid in the library stacks, and I told her everything Dad had said. She cried silently, tears streaming down her face. She admitted she'd always hoped Dad would come back for us someday. We made a plan to call him again tomorrow and figure out what to do next. That evening at dinner, Mom was in a weird mood. She kept looking at us like she knew something was up. She asked about our day in that fake sweet voice she used when she was fishing for information. Emma and I gave short, vague answers. I pushed my food around my plate, too nervous to eat. Mom noticed and asked if I was feeling sick. I lied and said I had a stomachache from lunch. She seemed to buy it and told me to go lie down. In my room, I pulled out the letter again and read it over and over. I memorized Dad's phone number just in case something happened to the letter. Then I hid it in a new spot, inside an old math textbook on my shelf. I figured Mom would never look there. The next day, day, Emma and I met in the library again and used my friend Noah's phone to call Dad. This time, we both talked to him. Emma could barely speak through her tears. Dad told us he lived in an apartment in Westfield and worked as an electrician. He said he had a spare bedroom that could be ours. He wanted us to come live with him, but he was worried about the legal issues. Mom had primary custody, and he wasn't supposed to contact us because of the restraining order. We talked about our options. Running away seemed too risky. Mom would definitely call the police. Dad suggested we talk to a trusted adult at school about what was happening at home. He said if there was evidence of abuse, it might help his case for custody. Emma and I promised to think about it. That weekend, Mom announced she was going to visit Aunt Karen for the day. This was our chance. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, Emma and I started searching the house for anything that might help us. We looked through Mom's desk, her filing cabinets, everywhere we could think of. In her bedroom closet, behind a stack of old photo albums, we found a locked metal box. Emma remembered seeing Mom use a small key she kept on her keychain. We knew we wouldn't be able to get that, but I had gotten pretty good at picking locks after locking myself out of my room a few times. I grabbed a paperclip and bent it into shape. After about 10 minutes of fiddling, I heard a satisfying click. Inside the box were court documents, letters from Dad's lawyer, and photos of us that Dad had sent over the years. There were birthday cards addressed to us that we'd never received. Emma found a document that looked like the restraining order Dad had mentioned. Mom had claimed Dad was abusive and unstable. There were witness statements from Mom's friends backing up her lies. We took pictures of everything with our phones. We carefully put everything back exactly as we'd found it and locked the box. We were just putting it back in the closet when we heard the front door open. Mom was home early. We froze in panic. I quickly shoved the box back and closed the closet door as quietly as I could. Emma straightened the bed where we'd been sitting. We could hear Mom's footsteps coming up the stairs. There was no way we could both get out of her room without her seeing us. I told Emma to hide in the closet while I created a distraction. I rushed out of the room just as Mom reached the top of the stairs. I pretended I was coming out of the bathroom and acted surprised to see her home so early. I asked how Aunt Karen was doing, trying to sound casual while my heart was pounding out of my chest. Mom seemed suspicious, but didn't say anything. She went into her room while I stood there, terrified she would find Emma. I heard Mom moving around in her room, opening drawers. I needed to get her out of there. I went to the top of the stairs and pretended to trip. I let out a yell as I bumped down a few steps. Mom came running out of her room. While she was checking if I was okay, I saw Emma slip out of the bedroom and dash into her own room. I had never been so relieved in my life. For the next few days, Emma and I were extra careful around Mom. We didn't want her to suspect anything. We continued calling Dad from friends' phones at school. He told us he was talking to a lawyer about the situation. The lawyer said the photos of Emma's injuries and the documentation we'd been keeping could help, but it would be better if we had an adult witness to what was happening at home. We decided to trust Ms. Patel, the guidance counselor. Emma and I went to see her together during lunch one day. We showed her the journal Emma had been keeping, the pictures of Emma's injuries, and told her about finding Dad's letters. Mr. Patel looked more and more concerned as we talked. She told us she was a mandated reporter, which meant she had to report suspected abuse to Child Protective Services. Emma and I looked at each other nervously. We were scared of what might happen, but we also knew we couldn't keep living like this. Ms. Patel called in the school principal, Mr. Greer, and we had to tell our story again. Mr. Greer asked if we felt safe going home. We both hesitated. The truth was, we didn't, but we were more afraid of what would happen if we said that. In the end, we told them we thought we'd be okay for now, as long as we didn't give Mom any reason to suspect anything. Mr. Greer seemed concerned but nodded, explaining that he would make the report that afternoon. He explained that a social worker would probably come to our house in the next few days to check things out. Emma and I were terrified about how Mom would react. We knew she would put on her perfect mother act for any official visitor. That night, Mom was in an unusually good mood. She ordered pizza for dinner and even let Emma pick a movie for us to watch together. It was so weird sitting there pretending everything was normal when our whole world was about to explode. I kept wondering if this was the calm before the storm, if somehow Mom knew what we'd done. The next day after school, a woman was waiting in our driveway when we got home. She introduced herself as Stevie from Child Protective Services. My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected things to happen so quickly. Mom wasn't home from work yet, and I was panicking about what would happen when she arrived. Stevie asked if she could come inside and talk to us. We sat at the kitchen table, and she asked us questions about our home life. She was nice but direct. She wanted specific examples of things Mom had done. Emma did most of the talking while I kept nervously glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes until Mom would be home. Just as Emma was showing Stevie the spots where her hair was still growing back, we heard Mom's car in the driveway. Emma and I exchanged terrified looks. Stevie noticed and assured us she would handle the situation. She told us to go to our rooms while she talked to Mom. I went upstairs but left my door cracked open so I could hear what was happening. Mom came in and immediately started demanding to know who Stevie was and why she was in our house. Stevie calmly explained she was from CPS and was following up on a report of possible abuse. Mom's voice changed instantly from angry to sweet and confused. She started talking about how much she loved her children and would never hurt them. She suggested Emma was making things up for attention. I heard Stevie ask Mom if she would be willing to let the children stay with a relative for a few days while the investigation proceeded. Mom's voice got hard again. She flatly refused and said if Stevie didn't leave immediately, she would call her lawyer. After a few more minutes of back and forth, I heard the front door close. Mom called us downstairs. Her face was calm, but her eyes were like ice. She told us dinner would be ready in an hour and to go do our homework. She didn't mention Stevie at all. The silence was more terrifying than if she'd been screaming at us. That night, I woke up to the sound of glass breaking. I crept out of my room and saw Mom in the kitchen, a broken wine glass at her feet. She was on the phone, her voice slurred and angry. I could only hear bits of the conversation, but she was talking about getting those kids in line and teaching them a lesson they won't forget. I quietly went back to my room and texted Emma, "We need to get out now." I grabbed my backpack and stuffed it with clothes and the few valuable things I had. I took the letter from Dad and the Harry Potter book with our notes. I snuck into Emma's room and found her already packing. We could still hear Mom downstairs ranting on the phone. We decided to climb out Emma's window onto the garage roof, then drop down to the yard. Emma went first, moving silently across the roof. I followed, my heart pounding so loud I was sure Mom would hear it. Just as I was about to drop down to the yard, I heard Mom scream my name from inside the house. She'd discovered we were gone. Emma and I ran as fast as we could down the street, not looking back. We didn't have much of a plan beyond get away from Mom. It was almost midnight and we had nowhere to go. We ended up at a 24-hour diner a few miles from our house. We sat in a corner booth, trying not to look suspicious while we figured out what to do next. I wanted to call Dad, but I was afraid to use my phone in case Mom could track it somehow. The waitress, Robin, kept giving us concerned looks. Finally, she came over and asked if we were okay. Emma burst into tears. Robin sat down with us, and before I knew it, we were telling her everything. She listened without interrupting, then told us her shift ended in an hour and we could crash at her apartment for the night if we needed a safe place. I was hesitant to trust a stranger, but we didn't have many options. Robin let us use her phone to call Dad. He answered right away, like he'd been waiting by the phone. When I told him what happened, he said he was getting in his his car immediately and would be there in 2 hours. He told us to stay with Robin until he arrived. Those 2 hours were the longest of my life. Emma fell asleep with her head on the table, exhausted from the stress and fear. I stayed awake, jumping at every sound, convinced Mom would burst through the door at any moment. Robin brought me free refills of hot chocolate and told me about her own difficult childhood. It helped to know other people had survived similar situations. Finally, at around 3 a.m., Dad arrived. I hadn't seen him in 8 years, but I recognized him instantly. He looked older, with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes, but he had the same kind smile I vaguely remembered from childhood. Emma woke up when he came in, and she just stared at him in shock. Then she ran into his arms, sobbing. I stood back, suddenly shy and uncertain. Dad looked at me over Emma's shoulder, his eyes filled with tears, and held out his arm. I stepped forward, and he pulled me into the hug. Robin gave Dad her contact information in case we needed a witness later. Dad thanked her over and over for helping us. We got into Dad's car, our few belongings tossed in the back seat, and drove away from the town where we'd been prisoners for so long. On the drive to Dad's apartment, he explained that what we'd done, running away, complicated things legally. Mom still had custody, and technically, he was violating the restraining order by being with us. But he said he'd rather face legal consequences than leave us in danger. He was going to call his lawyer first thing in the morning and report what had happened to the police and CPS. We arrived at Dad's apartment just as the sun was coming up. It was small but clean and welcoming. He showed us the spare room with a bunk bed he'd set up years ago, hoping someday we'd be able to visit. Emma and I were too exhausted to do anything but fall into bed. Despite everything, I felt safe for the first time in years. I woke up around noon to the sound of voices. I crept out to the living room and found Dad talking to a woman he introduced as his lawyer, Dallas. They were discussing our situation. Dallas explained that running away had been risky, but the documentation we had of Mom's abuse would help our case. She was going to file for an emergency custody hearing. Later that afternoon, 2 police officers came to take our statements. They were kind but serious as we told them everything. One of them, Officer Phillip, seemed especially concerned about the physical abuse Emma had endured. He took photos of the spots where her hair was still growing back and the fading bruises on her arms. That evening, Dad's phone rang. It was Mom. Dad put it on speaker so Dallas could hear. Mom was alternating between threats and fake concern, demanding to know where we were and saying we needed to come home immediately. Dad calmly told her we were safe and that she would be hearing from his lawyer. Mom screamed that she would destroy him for kidnapping her children. Dallas nodded at Dad, and he ended the call. The next few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers, social workers, and police. Emma and I had to tell our story over and over. It was exhausting and sometimes humiliating, but we kept going because we knew it was our only chance at freedom. Dad was amazing through it all, supporting us and never once making us feel like a burden. A week after we ran away, we had our first court hearing. Mom was there, dressed like the perfect mother in a conservative dress and pearls. She didn't look at us once. The judge listened to both sides and decided we would temporarily stay with Dad while a full investigation took place. Mom looked like she'd been slapped when the judge announced his decision. As we left the courthouse, Mom finally made eye contact with me. The hatred in her eyes made my blood run cold. She mouthed something I couldn't quite make out, but I didn't need to hear the words to know it was a threat. Dad put his arm around my shoulders and guided me to the car, away from her venomous gaze. The next few months were challenging, but healing. Emma and I started at a new school. Dad got us into therapy with a kind woman named Dr. Mary, who specialized in family trauma. Slowly, we began to process everything we'd been through. There were nightmares and panic attacks, days when the weight of our past felt crushing, but there were also moments of joy and normalcy that had been missing from our lives for so long. Mom didn't give up easily. She kept filing motions in court, trying to get us back. She told everyone who would listen that Dad had brainwashed us against her. She even showed up at our new school once, causing such a scene that the administration had to call the police. After that, the court ordered her to stay away from us, except during supervised visits, which neither Emma nor I wanted to attend. As the court case dragged on, more evidence of Mom's abuse came to light. The social workers interviewed our old neighbors and teachers. Robin testified about the night we ran away. Ms. Patel shared her observations from school. Even Christopher's mom, Cheryl, came forward to describe how differently Mom treated Emma and me. The turning point came when one of Mom's friends, Joyce, unexpectedly testified against her. Joyce described witnessing Mom slap Emma hard across the face at a neighborhood barbecue years ago. She said she'd confronted Mom about it later, and Mom had laughed it off, saying Emma needed to learn respect. Joyce admitted she'd been too cowardly to report it at the time, something she deeply regretted. Finally, after 6 months of legal battles, the judge made his final ruling. Dad was granted full custody of both of us. Mom was allowed only supervised visitation, and she would be required to complete parenting classes and therapy before those visits could begin. As the judge read his decision, I watched Mom's perfect facade crumble. For the first time, everyone could see her for what she truly was. That night, Dad, Emma, and I celebrated with pizza and ice cream. We weren't naive enough to think all our problems were solved. We knew we had years of healing ahead of us, but we were together, we were safe, and we were free from Mom's toxic control. As I looked at Emma laughing at something Dad said, I saw glimpses of the happy little girl she'd been before Mom crushed her spirit. I knew then that we were going to be okay. 2 weeks later, I found Emma sitting on the floor of our room, looking through old photos. She had found a picture of the 4 of us, Mom, Dad, Emma, and me, from before everything fell apart. We looked like a normal, happy family. Emma traced her finger over Mom's face in the photo. Do you think she ever really loved us? She asked quietly. I sat down next to her, thinking about it. I don't know, I finally answered. I think she loves the idea of having a perfect family, but I don't think she knows how to love actual people with flaws and needs. Emma nodded slowly. I'm still angry at her, but I also feel sorry for her sometimes. She's going to end up all alone. I put my arm around my sister's shoulders. That's her choice, not ours. We tried for years to make her happy. It's not our job anymore. Emma leaned her head against mine. I'm glad we have each other. And Dad, me too, I said, and I meant it more than anything I'd ever said in my life. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. Real, actual pancakes that weren't being used as some kind of twisted power play. Dad was in the kitchen flipping them while singing along to some old 80s song. Emma was already at the table, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in years. Morning, sleepyhead, Dad called when he saw me. Hungry? I nodded and slid into the chair next to Emma. She nudged me with her elbow and rolled her eyes at Dad's terrible singing. It felt so normal, so right, like this was how things were always supposed to be. School was getting better too. I'd made a few friends, and Emma had joined the science club where she was already working on some project involving plant growth or something. She tried explaining it to me once, but honestly, it went way over my head. The important thing was, she was happy doing it. About a month after the final custody hearing, we got a letter from Mom. Dad gave it to us without opening it, said it was our choice whether to read it or not. Emma and I took it to our room and stared at it for a long time before I finally tore it open. It was exactly what I expected. 4 pages of how we'd ruined her life, how ungrateful we were, how we'd betrayed her after everything she'd done for us. Not a single word of apology or even acknowledgement that she'd done anything wrong. I stopped reading halfway through and looked at Emma. "Want me to finish it?" she asked. I shook my head and crumpled it up. Nothing's changed. She's still making everything about her. We tossed the letter in the trash and went back to the living room where Dad was setting up a board game. He didn't ask about the letter, and we didn't offer any information. Some things weren't worth talking about. The supervised visits with Mom were supposed to start after she completed her parenting classes, but she never showed up for them. Dr. Mary said this was pretty common with narcissistic parents. They couldn't handle being told they were doing something wrong, so they just bailed instead. Part of me was relieved. I wasn't ready to face Mom again, and I wasn't sure I ever would be. Summer came, and Dad took us on our first real vacation. Nothing fancy, just a week at a lake cabin about 3 hours away. We swam and fished and made s'mores around a campfire. One night, Dad taught us how to identify constellations, pointing out the Big Dipper and Orion's belt in the clear night sky. I remembered how Mom used to say stargazing was a waste of time. She was wrong about that, like she was wrong about so many things. When school started again in the fall, I was actually looking forward to it. I'd been placed in advanced math, which was cool. Emma was starting high school and was nervous about it, but excited too. Dad took us shopping for school supplies and let us pick out whatever we wanted. I got this awesome set of mechanical pencils, and Emma found these notebooks with science jokes on the covers that made her laugh. Things weren't perfect, of course. We both still had nightmares sometimes. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, convinced Mom was in the house, coming to punish us for leaving. Emma still flinched when someone raised their voice, even if it wasn't directed at her. And we both had trouble accepting compliments or gifts without feeling like we needed to pay the person back somehow. Dr. Mary said these were normal responses to what we'd been through. She taught us techniques to deal with the anxiety and panic attacks, deep breathing, grounding exercises, stuff like that. It helped, but the healing process was slow. Some days were harder than others. Around Thanksgiving, we got another letter from Mom. This one was different. She wrote that she'd started therapy, for real this time, and was beginning to understand some of the damage she'd caused. She didn't outright apologize. That would have been too much to expect. But she did say she regretted how things had turned out. She asked if we might consider meeting with her and her therapist sometime after the holidays. Emma and I talked about it for days. We went back and forth, unable to decide. Finally, we asked Dad what he thought. "It's entirely up to you two," he said. "If you want to try, I'll support that. If you're not ready, that's completely okay too. There's no right or wrong answer here." In the end, we decided to give it a shot. One meeting, with both her therapist and Dr. Mary present, in a neutral location. No pressure, no expectations. The day of the meeting, I thought I was going to throw up. Emma wasn't doing much better. She kept fidgeting with her hair, twisting it around her finger the way she did when she was really anxious. Dad drove us to the counseling center and waited in the lobby while we went in. Mom was already there, sitting between her therapist and Dr. Mary. She looked different somehow, smaller, less intimidating. Her hair wasn't perfectly styled like usual, and she wasn't wearing much makeup. She didn't try to hug us or act like everything was fine, which was a first. The meeting was awkward and tense. Mom did most of the talking at first, explaining that she'd been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and was working on understanding how her behavior had affected us. She admitted she'd favored me over Emma because she saw Emma as competition for attention, which was messed up on so many levels. When it was our turn to speak, Emma surprised me by going first. She told Mom about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, how she'd believed for years that there was something fundamentally wrong with her, how she'd started to hate herself because Mom hated her. Her voice was steady, but tears streamed down her face the whole time. I couldn't say much. My throat felt too tight, and the words wouldn't come. I just managed to tell Mom that what she did wasn't normal or okay, and that we were still dealing with the fallout. Mom cried too, which was weird to see. I'd only seen her cry before when she was trying to manipulate someone. This seemed different, more genuine, but I still wasn't sure I trusted it. Her therapist had to remind her several times not to make excuses or shift blame when she started slipping into her old patterns. At the end of the session, Dr. Mary asked if we wanted to schedule another meeting. Emma and I looked at each other and silently agreed. Not yet. We needed time to process this one first. As we were leaving, Mom asked if she could give us something. She handed each of us an envelope and asked us not to open them until we got home. I shoved mine in my pocket, not making any promises. In the car, Dad asked how it went. Emma and I gave vague answers. Fine, okay, weird. He didn't push for details, just squeezed our shoulders and told us he was proud of us for being brave enough to go. Back home, Emma and I went to our room and finally opened the envelopes. Inside, mine was a check for $80 and a note that said, "This belongs to Emma. I was wrong to take it from her and give it to you." Emma's envelope contained a small silver locket that had belonged to our grandmother. Mom had always refused to give it to Emma, saying she'd just lose or break it. We sat in silence for a while, processing. The gesture was small compared to all the damage she'd done, but it was something. An acknowledgement, at least, that she remembered her wrongs and was trying to make amends in some tiny way. "Do you think she's really changed?" Emma asked. I shrugged. "I don't know, maybe she's trying to, but I think people like Mom don't change overnight, if they ever really change at all." "Yeah," Emma sighed. "I'm not ready to forgive her. I'm not sure I'll ever be." "You don't have to," I said. "Forgiveness is your choice, not her right." That was something Dr. Mary had taught us. Forgiveness wasn't something we owed anyone, especially not someone who had hurt us so deeply and for so long. Christmas that year was the best I could remember. Dad wasn't big on decorations, but he let us go wild with a real tree and lights and all that stuff. We made cookies that turned out kind of weird looking but tasted good. Dad got Emma a telescope and me a new gaming system. We got him a fancy coffee maker since he was always complaining about the old one. Mom sent gifts too, store wrapped with generic cards. We opened them, said thanks in obligatory texts, and moved on with our day. The presents didn't mean much compared to the peace and safety we felt with Dad. As winter turned to spring, we settled into a rhythm. School, therapy, hanging out with friends, movie nights with Dad. Normal stuff that had never been normal for us before. Emma joined the school science team and won some regional competition. I got really into basketball and made the junior varsity team, even though I wasn't that tall. We had another meeting with Mom in March. It went better than the first one. She seemed to be making progress in therapy, learning to recognize her toxic behaviors and actually listen when other people spoke. She asked about our lives, our interests, our friends, questions she'd never bothered with before unless she could somehow make the answers about her. After that, we agreed to monthly meetings. They were still supervised by the therapists, still awkward and sometimes tense, but gradually getting easier. Mom would never be the mother we needed or deserved, but maybe she could be someone we could have a limited, carefully managed relationship with someday. In April, Dad started dating someone he met at work. Her name was Melissa, and she was really nice, a kindergarten teacher with a loud laugh and a collection of weird earrings. She never tried to act like our mom or tell us what to do. She just hung out with us sometimes, brought over board games, and made this amazing homemade pizza. Emma and I both liked her, which was a relief. The last thing we needed was more family drama. One Saturday in May, Emma and I were cleaning out the garage with Dad when we found a box of old photos and home videos. We spent the whole afternoon going through them, laughing at Dad's terrible 90s haircut and Mom's shoulder pads. There were videos of Emma's first steps, my preschool graduation, family trips to the beach. "You guys were so happy in these," I said, looking at a photo of of all 4 of us at some amusement park. Emma couldn't have been more than 3, and I was just a toddler. Dad sighed. We were, for a while. Your mom wasn't always like she became. The problems were there from the beginning, but they got worse over time. After Emma was born, she started getting more controlling, more jealous of any attention I gave to either of you instead of her. By the time you were about 4, Elliot, things were really bad. Why did you stay so long? Emma asked. Dad was quiet for a minute. I was afraid of what would happen to you two if I left. I thought I could protect you better if I was in the house. When she finally kicked me out and got the restraining order, I fought like hell to get custody, but she was very convincing in court, made me look like the unstable one. He rubbed his face. I've spent years blaming myself for not getting you out sooner. It wasn't your fault, I said, and Emma nodded in agreement. Maybe not entirely, Dad said, but I should have seen the signs earlier, should have documented the abuse better, should have fought harder in court. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. Emma moved over to sit next to him. You're here now. That's what matters. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those old videos, about how things had gone so wrong in our family. I wondered if Mom ever looked at those same photos and felt regret for the family she'd destroyed with her toxicity. The next morning, I found Emma already up, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. She looked like she hadn't slept much either. I've been thinking, she said when I sat down across from her, about Mom and everything that happened. Yeah, me too. I don't think I'll ever understand why she treated me the way she did, or why she tried to turn you against me. She twisted her mug in her hands, but I'm glad we found our way back to each other. I nodded. Me too. I'm sorry for all those years I was a jerk to you because of her. Emma shrugged. You were just a kid. We both were, and we were both doing whatever we had to do to survive her. She was right. As messed up as things had been, we'd both just been trying to get through each day the best we could. The fact that we were here now, together and healing, was what mattered. Dad came in a few minutes later, yawning and heading straight for the coffee maker. You two are up early. Everything okay? Emma and I exchanged a look. Yeah, I said. Everything's good. And for the first time in my life, I actually meant it. Things weren't perfect. We still had a lot of healing to do, individually and as a family. Mom was still Mom, with all her issues and damage. But we were safe now. We had Dad, and we had each other. We were learning what a healthy family looked like, how to trust and be trusted, how to love without fear or conditions. That afternoon, Emma and I went for a bike ride around the neighborhood. The sun was shining, and the air smelled like fresh cut grass and someone's barbecue. We raced each other down the big hill by the park, laughing as the wind rushed past us. For those few minutes, we weren't survivors of abuse or kids with trauma. We were just a brother and sister enjoying a perfect spring day together. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Not just escaping Mom's house of horrors, but finding our way back to the simple joys that should have been our birthright all along. The ability to laugh freely, to trust, to hope, to just be kids without fear hanging over us like a shadow. As we pedaled home, I glanced over at Emma. She caught my eye and smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes and lit up her whole face. I smiled back, feeling something settle in my chest, a certainty that no matter what challenges life threw at us in the future, we'd face them together and we'd be okay.